They left me waiting outside, not knowing that in 4 minutes I would say goodbye to them all. I stood there, holding the folder against my chest, staring at the receptionist. She didn't even look up. Not a single glance. I'd been here before, but it had been years. I didn't need to explain why I was here or why I wasn't a face they recognized. They were supposed to know. Instead, she barely acknowledged me, her voice flat and dismissive as she muttered, "Ma'am, the staff interviews are by the service entrance." My gaze didn't falter. It stayed locked on her, my eyes steady, unblinking. I didn't react to the disdain. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I didn't need to say a word. I showed her the confirmation on my phone. Just a simple gesture. But she didn't care. A slight pause. She looked at the phone, and then her eyes dropped. "Ah, it must be a system error. Please wait there." Her words were a dismissal. Another moment of indifference. I took a seat on the wooden bench, and then they whispered. I could hear them. The murmurs of the employees as they passed by, exchanged glances, and judged. What's she doing here? She looks out of place. The words stung, but I didn't react. My fingers tightened around the folder. Inside me, anger simmered, boiling under the surface. But on the outside, I remained calm. Calm in a way that unnerved them. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I'd spent years staying behind the scenes, letting others handle the mess. But today was different. Today, they would learn who I really was. I waited, the minutes stretching, my fingers still wrapped tightly around that folder. My phone buzzed. The appointment was confirmed, but the young assistant who approached barely glanced at me. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, the words barely a flicker of acknowledgement. "Maybe you came to the wrong place." Her tone wasn't questioning. It was dismissive, a sharp reminder that, to them, I was invisible, a mistake to be corrected. I looked at her, silently showing her my phone, the confirmation screen glowing in front of her face. She barely spared it a glance before turning to the receptionist. "This isn't right," she muttered. The receptionist, still not fully engaging with me, picked up the phone. I watched as she dialed. No words exchanged, just her quiet instructions. And soon, a security guard appeared. His steps were heavy, and there was an unease in his eyes, like he already knew something was off. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polite but edged with confusion. "Do you need me to walk you somewhere?" I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. "I have a confirmed appointment. Check your calendar." The words were simple, but they carried weight. I stood my ground, every fiber of me unwavering. I didn't need to explain further, but the tension in the room thickened, an uncomfortable silence pressing down. The security guard hesitated, but I could feel the power in my calm, and that discomfort, it was only the beginning. There were 4 minutes left until everything changed, but no one suspected anything yet. I could feel the minutes passing, ticking down, each second pulling me closer to the moment when they would realize what they'd done. The receptionist still wore that look of confusion, a subtle shift in her eyes as she glanced at me again, trying to place me. But she didn't know. None of them did. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and by the time they realized it, it would be too late. Upstairs, the board of directors sat in the meeting room, waiting for Maria Mercedes Olivo. They were all smiles, expecting the same meeting, the same routine. They had no clue, and I let them sit in their oblivion. I could almost hear the sound of their complacency from below. Unbothered, unaware. "Is there a problem?" One of the senior lawyers called out from behind the desk, watching the receptionist fidget. She shifted uncomfortably, looking back at me, but still not fully registering the situation. She didn't understand that this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an error. The problem wasn't with my presence. The problem was everything they had become. Little did they know, the firm was on the brink of a transformation they never saw coming. What happens when someone they least expect is about to take control? The clock continued to tick. They wouldn't know the true gravity of the moment until the last second, until everything changed. The security guard stood in front of me, still unsure, as if my calmness didn't match the confusion unfolding around us. He hesitated, then finally spoke. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right place?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice smooth, unwavering. "But you might want to check with your boss." Just then, the HR director's phone rang. I could see her hand tremble as she picked it up, and a moment later, her face drained of color. I didn't need to hear the words to know. The panic was already beginning. Her voice cracked as she spoke into the phone, the reality setting in. What do you mean she's not here? There it was. The moment they realized. The senior partner bolted from the conference room, his footsteps quick, hurried, his eyes scanning every corner of the lobby. "Where is Maria Mercedes Olivo?" he shouted, as if the question alone would summon me from thin air. But I was already moving. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, cutting off their frantic scramble. Inside the elevator, the panic continued, but I remained perfectly still, my face betraying nothing. My calm was the only answer they'd get. The consequences were just beginning. As the doors closed, I allowed myself a single, knowing smile. What had started as a small disruption was about to shake everything to its core. The moment the elevator doors closed, I felt the shift. Behind me, the office exploded into confusion. The murmurs, the frantic calls, the scrambling to make sense of the situation, it all unfolded in an instant. The receptionist, now completely lost, looked around the room, trying to piece together what was happening, but there was no longer any certainty in her actions. The same people who had been murmuring about me just minutes ago, avoiding my gaze, were now too afraid to even meet my eyes. They knew. They felt the change, even if they couldn't yet understand what it meant. The chaos spread quickly. Employees rushed around, eyes wide with panic, making calls, gathering information, searching for a name they hadn't recognized until now. They looked for answers, but they were too late. The damage had been done. I let them chase shadows. I let the uncertainty seep into the air, knowing it would do its work. I let the uncertainty do its work. It wasn't anger I felt watching them scramble. It was something much colder, knowing that when they finally understood, it would be too late to undo what had been set in motion. I was already miles away from their confusion, emotionally detached from the mess they had created. The firm was already changing, and they didn't even know who was in control yet. 2 hours later, I walked back through those doors, but this time I wasn't alone. My legal team flanked me, confident, poised, ready. The moment I stepped into the office, it fell silent. The chaos of the last 2 hours had dissipated, but the tension? That was only just beginning. "I'm not here to hear apologies," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "I'm here to understand how a firm of this reputation can treat anyone who walks through its doors with such indifference." The room froze. They all knew what was coming, but no one could stop it. I let the silence hang for a moment before continuing. The lack of customer service protocols, the exclusionary culture, the systemic disrespect that has been allowed to fester, it ends today. I looked around the room, eyes scanning every face, watching their reactions. There was no escape from what was happening now. They were going to have to face it, whether they were ready or not. I could feel the weight of their unspoken questions. And just as I planned, I made the decisions clear. From this moment on, I said, we will implement a new, inclusive system of care. Every person who walks through those doors will be treated with the same respect. No exceptions. The culture will change, starting now. The room stayed still, but I could see the flicker of recognition in their eyes. They knew what had to be done, and now it was up to them to act. As the firm begins to grasp the gravity of the situation, one question lingers. Will they accept change or cling to the old ways that brought them to this point? I stood at the front of the room, watching them as the weight of what I had just said settled in. The room, once tense with fear, now felt heavy with realization. I didn't need to repeat myself. The message was clear. Every person who walks through those doors will be treated with the same respect. I declared, my voice sharp, unwavering, regardless of their appearance or the reason for their visit. The words echoed in the stillness of the room. I saw a few heads nodding, but others looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the change that was coming. Too bad. This wasn't about comfort. This was about what was right. One of the younger paralegals, someone who had been silent until now, raised her hand. She looked at me, and for the first time in all of this, I saw sincerity in her eyes. How can we ensure this doesn't happen again? She asked, her voice quiet but determined. I met her gaze, no hesitation in my response. Real change begins when each person commits to acting correctly, even when they think no one is watching. The room grew quieter. The realization set in that this wasn't just about new rules. It was about a complete shift in how things would be done. I wasn't just imposing a system. I was demanding integrity, respect, and accountability. The transformation had already begun, and some of them would need to adapt or step aside. The rest? They had a choice to make, and it was going to be one that defined their future here. News of the firm's transformation spread faster than I had anticipated. Media outlets picked up the story, highlighting the firm's bold shift and its commitment to a new standard of service and respect. The story became a case study in organizational change, and before long, the firm was being recognized for more than just its legal expertise. The firm, previously known only for its legal expertise, the headlines read, also began to be recognized for its excellence in service and respect for all people. I watched as the reports flooded in, and with them, messages from across the spectrum. People I had never met, who had experienced their own battles with disrespect and indifference, reached out to me. Their words filled my inbox, expressing gratitude and admiration for the change. I received messages of gratitude from people who had lived through similar experiences in different contexts. I thought to myself, reading each one, their stories mirrored the very issues I had faced that day. And in those words, I felt something shift in me once more. It wasn't just the firm that had changed. This had become something bigger, something that people needed. And somehow, in the midst of it all, I had managed to create something that wasn't just about power. It was about setting a new standard for everyone. But this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As I stood in the reception, looking at the new motto displayed on the wall, it hit me. This was never about revenge. What I did wasn't revenge. It was leadership. I could feel the weight of those words, not just in the moment, but in the transformation I had set in motion. The firm had changed. The people inside it had changed. And in turn, so had I. It wasn't just about asserting power. It was about creating a place where respect wasn't a fleeting gesture, but a standard. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Without exception, the motto read, a permanent reminder of what we had become. It was more than just a set of rules or a culture shift. It was a new way of thinking and new way of operating. A way that could reach beyond the walls of this firm and touch everyone who needed to hear it. True growth opportunities appear when we least expect them, I thought, looking around the now quiet, transformed office. And a true leader is recognized not by how they wield power, but by how they use it to create positive change. But as much as I knew the firm had shifted, I couldn't help but wonder, would this last? Would the new leadership hold firm, or would the old ways creep back in, just like they always do? After everything that's unfolded, do you think the new leadership will truly last? Or is it just another fleeting moment in a cycle of power? Where do you think the future of leadership really lies? If you were inspired by this transformation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next, because true leadership is only just beginning to reshape the world. Tell us in the comments, how do you define true leadership? What steps do you think organizations should take to ensure respect is always at the forefront? Let's dive into this conversation together.